rabbit they roasted would probably taste like charcoal, and they would die if they ate it. Just as Jacob had thought, Dex and his siblings could not do much with the rabbit in front of them. They were good at hunting, but they did not know where to begin with roasting the rabbit. "Did you bring a dagger?" Kevin asked with a smile. "I did." Dex was slightly surprised for a moment. Then, he hurriedly pulled out a dagger from his waist and handed it over to Kevin. At the same time, he was astonished. Was Kevin going to do it himself? Just as Dex finished his thought, Kevin took the dagger and picked up the rabbit, starting to peel the hide and shave the tendons. His proficient technique was breathtaking. It was as if Kevin had done it thousands of times before. The four Bennett brothers were all amazed, their mouths wide open. Even if they had beaten them to death, they had never imagined that Kevin would even do such a thing. From what they knew, for a young guy like Kevin, he should be living a life where food came and went. Wasn't cooking done by the servants in the house? The four Bennett siblings did not know that when Kevin was young, he was thrown into the depths of the mountains by his mother and asked to live on his own. At that time, he had fought against the tigers and wolves to satisfy his hunger with the blood of beasts. Over the years, Kevin had accumulated a lot of fighting skills, and his roasting skills had also become first-rate. During his time deep in the mountains, Kevin roasted at least 80 different kinds of game. Kevin had naturally mastered many skillful roasting techniques. By this time, he was pretty familiar with roasting rabbits. 15 minutes later, two golden-colored, fragrant rabbits appeared in front of the four Bennett siblings. The four Bennett brothers all gulped and drooled at sight. In the Oso family camp not far away, many of the mercenaries also had their throats twitching as they watched it. Then, finally, they all turned to look at Kevin. Taking down the roasted rabbit from the tree branch, Kevin slowly tore it open and gave the tender meat to the four Bennett siblings. "Thank you, Kevin!" Dex wanted to be polite, but the honest Gavin received the rabbit meat from Kevin and bit down on it. After the rabbit meat entered his mouth, Gavin immediately opened his eyes wide with a look of disbelief. "How is it?" Atticus asked eagerly. The rabbit that Kevin roasted was delicious. Gavin didn't say anything but took another bite, his face full of pleasure. Atticus also took the rabbit meat that Kevin passed him. After thanking him, he took a bite of the fresh meat, and his eyes immediately lit up. "Delicious! It's too delicious! I've never eaten anything so delicious in my life!" Atticus chewed on the rabbit meat and started complimenting Kevin without any hesitation. "The rabbit meat that Kevin roasted is the best!" Dex's skin was not as thick as Atticus, but he sighed from the bottom of his heart. Kevin's cooking skills were indeed on par with 5-star hotel chefs. Very quickly, the Bennett siblings ate all the rabbit meat in their hands. After they finished, they looked at each other, and all of them saw the awkwardness in each other's eyes. It was too delicious, and they hadn't eaten their fill yet. "There's another one here." Kevin smiled as if he had already expected their reactions. He then took down the other roasted rabbit and handed it to the four of them. The four quickly waved their hands. "Kevin, this is only for you." But Kevin shook his head and interrupted. He glanced at the piles of prey on the ground and smiled. "There are still so many here. I can always roast them later." The last time Kevin roasted a wild rabbit was 3 years ago when he was being hunted down. Today, he finally got another chance, so he naturally cooked to his heart's content. While Kevin cooked, the four of them took the roasted rabbit and began to chop it into pieces. Everyone in the Oso family could only watch from the side. Although they brought delicacies like roast duck, they were not on the same level as Kevin's freshly roasted game. Jacob's face was currently green. The Bennett siblings might not know how to roast, but Kevin sure did. Judging from Kevin's expertise, he was very familiar with the process. It was not his first time. Jacob felt his face burning in pain. Bianca's stomach rumbled. Although her voice was soft, it still reached the ears of the crowd. For a moment, everyone looked at her strangely. Bianca blushed slightly and felt a little embarrassed. She had eaten a lot of delicacies from mountains and seas, but at this moment, she could not resist the aroma of Kevin's roasted rabbit. Uncle, I want some too. Bianca pointed at the branch that the roasted rabbit was hanging on. She acted more like a young, greedy child, not a respected member of the great Oso family. Barry glanced at Bianca awkwardly. Miss, I don't know how to roast. What Barry said was naturally the truth. As an Oso family warrior, his position was high and mighty. And he usually lived a life of luxury. So how could he personally cook, let alone roast a wild rabbit, even make pancakes? Something he had never done before? Fine. Bianca pouted her lips in dissatisfaction. Afterward, she retracted her gaze and tried her best not to look at the rabbit meat on Kevin's grill. However, the more she tried to restrain herself, the more her heart itched. It was as if a small hand scratched her heart, and she felt uncomfortable all over. At this moment, Jacob rolled his eyes and said flirtatiously, Miss, do you want me to go get some rabbit meat for you? I get annoyed whenever I see you. Bianca glanced at Jacob in disgust. Didn't she know what Jacob had in mind? To make her steal someone else's food to eat? What if it got out? She was the Grand Bianca of the Oso family, not some local tyrant. Miss, don't be angry. I'm leaving. Jacob smiled coyly and retreated to the side. He was a bit confused. Wasn't he trying to help Bianca? Why did Bianca tell him to leave so rudely? The dry firewood on the ground was plentiful, and the fire was immense. Coupled with Kevin's skilled technique, he was able to roast quite a few wild games every 7 to 8 minutes. The 4 Bennett siblings were engrossed with eating, their mouths full of meat. Before long, they leaned back and rested their full bellies. Atticus let out a burp and shouted an expression that said he didn't want to stop eating yet. Seeing that Jacob was still staring at him resentfully, Atticus couldn't help but smile playfully. He picked up a roasted rabbit and waved it at Jacob, asking with a smile, Jacob, do you want one? Without a doubt, Atticus was taking revenge on Jacob for humiliating him. Shut up. Jacob gritted his teeth. Naturally, he couldn't let Atticus Bennett have a good time. Atticus smiled and didn't think much of it. Just like Jacob, he also didn't plan to rely on a rabbit to do anything to Jacob. He only wanted to humiliate him a little. Unexpectedly, Barry opened his mouth coldly. Jacob, go get that wild rabbit. Huh? Jacob's mouth was wide open as he looked at Barry in confusion. What does Barry mean by this? Are you deaf? Barry's face turned cold. I told you to go and get that wild rabbit. Barry brought it over, not to eat it, but to give Bianca a taste. Bianca was one of the most influential women in the Oso family, so if she said she wanted the stars in the sky, they had to think of a way to bring them to her. Rebecca wanted to eat the roasted rabbit in Kevin's hand. However, she couldn't say that out loud because she would embarrass herself. Only Barry could speak. As for the conflict between Jacob and Kevin, Kevin had humiliated them in the past. These things were not within Barry's consideration. Because of the Oso family's eyes, Jacob's position was like a dog's. Even though Jacob was a martial artist at Dark Force stage, his identity was still there. He was a member of a gang outside the country that had provoked countless enemies. Furthermore, he was a traitor that had identified his group. These two identities, regardless of which one they were disgraceful. They had nailed Jacob to the ground in humiliation. No matter where Jacob went, he would be looked down upon. If not for the recent turmoil in the Oso family and the fact that they were lacking in human resources, he would not have allowed Jacob to enter the Oso family gate at all. Sir, my little brother and I will not fight. An unprecedented sense of humiliation currently surrounded him. Although he had long guessed that the Oso family did not hold him in high regard, he still did not expect them to make him bow his head before his enemies for the sake of a roasted rabbit. You don't want to go? Barry's voice suddenly turned cold, and even the air became tense. Jacob shuddered and hurriedly got up. I'll go. He walked toward Atticus step by step. His teeth were about to shatter from his clenched jaw. When Jacob came over, Kevin and the rest were all surprised. Especially Kevin. Looking at how furious Barry was yesterday, he thought that the Oso family highly valued Jacob. And now that he looked at it, Jacob was like a dog to them. Give me the roasted rabbit. Jacob gritted his teeth as he spoke. The hatred in his heart for Kevin had climbed to a new level. It was all because of Kevin. If it weren't for Kevin, he wouldn't have lost so much respect. You want me to give it to you just because you said so? Atticus sneered. He did not care about Jacob at all. Jacob gritted his teeth. He wanted to make a move and kill the 4 Bennett brothers and sisters along with Kevin. But the Oso family would not allow that. On the account that you and I used to be fellow disciples of the same sect. Jacob's tone softened, but Atticus showed no mercy. Without waiting for Jacob to finish, he interrupted him with a sneer. Now you realize that we're brothers from the same sect? When you betrayed our master and sold the news of the Ice Lotus to the Oso family, why didn't you remember then?